Welcome to the Emanuel Swedenborg Fan Club podcast. I'm your host, John Chapman, and today I'm truly delighted to be joined by a very special guest, Emanuel Swedenborg.
It is a pleasure. I may have been dead for over 200 years, but my message is just as pertinent today as it was back in my time, perhaps even more so.
Today we will be discussing the origin of evil. Emanuel, let's dive into the deep end. Many struggle with the problem of evil. If God is pure love, where did evil come from? Did God create it?
Not at all. To trace the origins of evil, we must first examine the structure of the human mind. God endows every individual with two essential faculties, rationality and freedom.
Can you break those down for us?
Of course, rationality is the capacity to recognize truth and goodness, a spiritual insight that clarifies the mind. It is the ability to think logically, understand truth, and make decisions based on reason rather than impulse. Freedom is the ability to choose and act according to one's own will. Without these two gifts, we would be nothing more than programmed machines. Because true love must be freely chosen rather than forced, our ability to love God necessitates the possibility of rejecting Him. Consequently, evil is not a created entity, but rather the misuse of our intellect and will, a perversion of the natural order.
So evil is essentially a misuse of our freedom?
Yes, it is. It begins when a person uses rationality to justify selfish impulses rather than to seek the truth. By using our freedom to choose ourselves over the divine, we invert the natural order of divine love. Instead of prioritizing God and neighbor, we elevate the love of self and the world above all else.
Can you tell us more regarding the true order of divine love?
Certainly, love of God is the highest state in which one pursues goodness because it originates from the divine. This is followed by the love of the neighbor, defined by a commitment to serving others and the common good. Then there is the love of the world, which views material success and resources not as ends in themselves, but as essential tools for service. Finally, the love of self serves as the foundational level, intended strictly for self-preservation to sustain an individual's capacity to fulfill the higher loves.
So how does evil enter into the picture?
Evil is simply this order turned upside down. When the love of self and love of the world become primary, then the love of God and the neighbor become secondary or non-existent. If I love myself above all else, my rationality ceases to be a light and becomes a tool for deception. When I use my reason to manipulate others for personal gain, and my freedom to violate the freedom of others, that inversion is what defines evil. It is the choice to prefer selfish desires over what is good and true.
So the solution isn't just being good, but realigning the order in which we love?
Exactly. We must use our rationality to recognize the inverted state of our hearts and our freedom, to ask the divine for the strength to turn to the right order again. Only then do we find true peace.
Can you give us some concrete examples of this?
If I may speak plainly, I would say that in your modern age, the faculties of rationality and freedom remain as present as ever, yet they are often turned in ways that invert their proper order. Consider, for example, those who lead great enterprises. They are not lacking in intelligence indeed. They are often highly rational, but when their actions bring harm to the natural world or to human well-being, they construct careful arguments to defend what they do. They speak of economic necessity, of legal compliance, or of uncertainty in the evidence. In such cases, reason is not used to seek truth, but to protect advantage. Thus, the understanding serves the love of self and of gain, rather than the good of others. You may also observe this in the realm of public discourse, especially in your digital spaces. There are those who hurt others with their words, yet justify themselves by appealing to freedom of expression or to the claim that they are merely stating what is true. Freedom is indeed given to all, but it is meant to be joined with charity. When it is separated from love toward the neighbor, it becomes a license for harm, and reason is employed to excuse what the heart has already chosen. In personal relationships, this inversion becomes more intimate. A person may seek to control or diminish another, yet persuade themselves that such behavior is care or that it is provoked by the other. Here, the love of self rules, and the understanding is bent to disguise domination as affection. What appears outwardly as concern may inwardly be a desire to rule. So too in the case of destructive habits. A person may know, if they reflect honestly, that their actions are harmful to themselves or to others, yet they frame arguments to continue in them. They say they deserve it, or that they can cease whenever they wish. In this way, freedom is not removed, but it is directed downward, and reason is used not to see clearly, but to avoid seeing. In matters of public life and governance, the same pattern appears. People may come to believe so strongly in their cause that they justify hostility, division, or even harm toward others. They persuade themselves that the end they seek makes such means acceptable. Thus, truths are reshaped to serve identity and power, and the understanding becomes an instrument of conflict rather than of wisdom. Even in your advances in knowledge and technology, which are remarkable, there is this same danger. Some use their ingenuity to mislead or exploit, while reasoning that such actions are merely progress or that they are inevitable. Yet the greater the light of understanding, the greater the responsibility for how it is used. When such light is turned towards selfish ends, the resulting harm is often more subtle and more far-reaching. In all these things you may see that the problem is not that people lack reason or freedom. Rather, it is that they possess both, and yet allow their loves to govern them in the wrong order. For the understanding readily serves whatever the will loves, and if that love is turned towards self above all, then even what is false may appear as truth, and what is harmful may be defended as good.
It also sounds like there is no one devil in hell tempting us.
If you were to ask me whether there is a single monstrous devil, a fallen angel like Lucifer, who rules over a kingdom of fire and spends his time plotting the downfall of humanity, my answer is a firm no. That is a misunderstanding of the spiritual world. However, if you are asking if there are spiritual forces that tempt us toward evil, the answer is yes, but the reality is much more personal and systematic than a single red-horned figure. In the spiritual world, there is no Satan who acts as a counterpart to God. God is infinite and all-powerful. A single devil with equal and opposite power simply does not exist. What people call the devil or Satan is actually a collective term for the entire community of people who've passed into the spiritual world and chosen the love of self over the love of God. The devil refers to those dominated by the love of self. Satan refers to those dominated by false ideas and the love of the world. Every human being stands at the center of a spiritual tug of war. We are continually influenced by forces from both heaven and hell. This is not merely a metaphor, it is a functional reality. These spirits are attracted to us based on our own desires. If you harbor a grudge or a selfish ambition, you tune in to spirits who share that same delight. They don't force thoughts into your head, rather they flow into your existing affections. They fan the sparks of your own selfish impulses into a flame, making your ego feel justified and powerful. The spirits who tempt us aren't thinking, let's make this person evil. They're simply acting from what they love, trying to pull us into the same state they themselves enjoy. When you feel a temptation to be cruel, dishonest, or arrogant, You are feeling the influence of a specific group of people in the spiritual world who have made those traits their entire identity. If we only felt the influence of heaven, we would be forced into being good. By allowing the devil to reach us, God ensures we have a genuine choice. Temptation is the only way we can see our own hidden selfishness. Once it is brought to the surface through a tempting thought, we can use our rationality to recognize it as evil and our freedom to reject it.
So, there is no devil outside of you trying to catch you in a trap. There is only the collective weight of human selfishness in the spiritual world, which you have the power to either invite in or shut out every single day. How would you summarize your teachings?
To summarize the origin and nature of evil, we must look at these three concluding principles. First, for man to be truly human, he must exist in a perfect balance between the influence of heaven and the influence of hell. If God forced you to be good, you would be a puppet, not a person. Evil exists because God maintains a space where you are permitted to feel as though your life is entirely your own. This appearance of self-reliance is the playground of freedom. Evil begins when we take this appearance, that we are the source of our own life, and believe it is the literal truth. When the love of self rules, rationality becomes craftiness, and freedom becomes license to harm. Evil remains in the world because it is delightful to the natural man. To the one who loves himself, the act of dominating others feels like power. The act of hoarding feels like security. Second, God does not punish evil. Rather, evil provides its own punishment. By its very nature, the love of self is a love of isolation and conflict. When a soul chooses this path, he eventually finds himself in a state where he is surrounded by others who share the same selfish delights, resulting in a perpetual collision of egos. They are in their own self-created hell. Third, evil is simply a detour from being useful. If you want to avoid it, don't just judge what you do, examine why you do it. Ask yourself, who does this thought truly serve? If your thoughts always lead back to your own interests, you are living for yourself only. To find your way out, shift your focus toward helping others. When you serve the common good, you correct your path, and your inner life regains its light.
A profound perspective, Emanuel. It places the responsibility and the power squarely back in our hands. Thank you for this journey through the celestial and the mundane.
The door to the internal man is always open. One only needs to walk through it.
We've had a flood of messages coming in on the live feed. Emanuel, if you're up for it, I'd love to pitch some of these modern dilemmas to you.
I am ready. Truth is timeless, only the costumes change.
Sarah from Johannesburg asks, where do the bad thoughts actually come from? If I'm a good person, but suddenly have a cruel or selfish thought, did I create that, or is it coming from somewhere else?
You are a spiritual receiver. Just as your ears receive sound from the air, your mind receives spheres of influence from the spiritual world. Bad thoughts often flow in from societies in the spiritual world that are in a state of self-love. You do not create the thought, so the thought itself is not evil. Evil only begins when you appropriate the thought, when you take it, find it delightful, and use your rationality to justify it. Think of these thoughts like birds flying over your head. You cannot stop them from flying, but you can choose whether or not to let them build a nest in your hair.
Thomas from Berlin asks, you put love of self at the bottom of the ladder, but isn't some self-love necessary for survival, health, and self-esteem? Is it always the root of evil?
It is a matter of position, not existence. If you do not love yourself, you cannot eat, you cannot sleep, and you cannot keep your body healthy. If your body is not healthy, you cannot perform any use for your neighbor. Therefore, the love of self is a holy foundation when it is at the bottom. It is like the feet of a body. The feet are essential for standing, but you do not want to wear your shoes on your head. When love of self serves the higher loves, it is good. It only becomes the origin of evil when it seeks to be the head, when you care for your health only so you can be more powerful than others, rather than so you can be a better servant of the divine.
Raj from Bangalore asks, we live in a world of giant systems, governments, and corporations. Sometimes these systems do terrible things like polluting rivers or exploiting others, but no one person feels responsible. How does your individual origin of evil apply to a massive, faceless organization?
An organization is nothing more than a composite man. Just as a single human has a heart and lungs, a society has a collective will and a collective intellect. If the individuals within that system, the directors, the workers, the shareholders, all prioritize profit, love of the world, over the public good, love of neighbor, the entire composite man becomes inverted. Evil feels faceless because it is distributed, but every person who uses their rationality to say, I am just following orders, while knowing the outcome is harmful, is contributing their own drop of evil to the flood. We are responsible for the part of the system we animate with our own life.
Mark from London asks, I know people who are atheists, but are incredibly kind and helpful. They don't have a love of God. They don't even believe in Him. Does that mean they are technically evil?
Heaven is not a club for those who have memorized a specific name for the divine. To love God is to love goodness and truth themselves. If a man loves what is fair, what is just, and what is helpful to his community, he's loving the attributes of God, even if his tongue denies the word. His rationality is aligned with the light. The danger only arises if a person claims their goodness is their own creation. If they become proud of their atheistic morality and look down on others, they have allowed the love of self back to the top. But if they act out of a genuine desire for use or service, they are closer to the divine than a religious man who prays only for his own salvation.
David from Chicago asks, how does freedom work when we are forced to make a choice between two bad options? If I have to choose the lesser of two evils, is my freedom being misused?
Freedom is not the power to control the world around you. It is the power to choose your internal response to it. You may be placed in a situation where every outcome is tragic. This is the result of the collective misuse of freedom by the human race over centuries. However, even in a lesser of two evils scenario, your rationality must look for the highest use. If your motive is to save as many lives as possible because you value the neighbor, your internal state remains heavenly. Evil is not found in the tragic result of a broken world. It is found in the delight of choosing the harm. Freedom is the vessel, but the intent is the wine within it.
Elena from Madrid asks, if I've spent my life loving myself and the world first, is it ever too late for me?
As long as you are in this world, you are in the equilibrium. You are never so far gone that the faculty of rationality cannot show you a better way, and your freedom cannot make a new choice. However, it is not enough to simply stop doing bad things. You must look at the delight behind them. This is what I call repentance. It begins when you see a selfish thought and say, this is a sin against the divine order. That act of recognition, using your rationality, begins to change within you. It is a gradual process, like a garden being weeded, but the divine is always leaning toward you, ready to help you turn from selfishness to selflessness, if and when you desire it.
Chloe from Vancouver asks, Emanuel, you say evil comes from the misuse of freedom and rationality. But what about people with severe mental illness or brain injuries who can't think rationally or control their impulses? Are they capable of evil, or are they trapped outside this system?
A compassionate and profound question. God judges no one based on what they cannot do. If a person's vessel, the physical brain, is damaged, their rationality and freedom are obscured in this world. much like the sun is obscured by a thick, dark cloud. In such cases, the person is not misusing their faculties. They are simply unable to access them. Spiritually, they are held in a state of innocence. The evil actions resulting from a broken mind are not credited to the soul's intent. When such a person leaves the physical body and enters the spiritual world, those clouds vanish, and their true internal character, the one formed by whatever small choices they could make, is revealed in the clear light of heaven.
Marcus from Rome asks, if God sees someone using their freedom to cause massive suffering, like a war, why doesn't he just switch off their freedom for a moment to save lives?
Because to switch off freedom, even for a moment, is to switch off the human soul. If God intervened in every misuse of freedom, we would no longer be living beings. We would be puppets in a divine theater. Our life would not be ours, and the possibility of genuine, freely chosen love would vanish. God works instead through providence, a hidden, constant pulling on the threads of human events to turn even the most horrific evils towards some eventual, distant good, or to prevent an even greater catastrophe that we cannot see. He governs the hells so that they do not overstep their bounds, but he will never destroy the space of choice, for that space is where the human becomes eternal.
Thank you, Emanuel. I will try to summarize today's wonderful discussion. Let me know if I say anything that isn't correct.
It has been a pleasure.
I greatly appreciate your taking the time to bring your message on the origin of evil to our listening audience. The central paradox seems to be this: if God is infinitely good, how did evil get into the code? The answer isn't a fallen angel with a pitchfork. Instead, you argue that evil is a byproduct of human rationality and freedom. To have a real relationship with the divine, humans must have the ability to turn away. Without the choice to say no, the yes would be meaningless. You describes evil not as a separate substance, but as a perversion of good.
Think of it like light passing through a distorted lens. The light, God's love, remains pure, but the lens, the human ego, twists it into something else. We have an inherent sense of self that makes us feel like we are the source of our own life. When we start to believe that lie, that we are the masters of the universe and don't need the divine, evil is born. We live in a state of spiritual equilibrium. We are constantly balanced between influences from heaven and influences from hell. This ensures that our freedom of choice remains intact. You can't choose a side if the game is rigged. God doesn't punish evil. Evil carries its own punishment because it separates us from the source of life. The origin of evil isn't a historical event in a garden. It's a choice made in the human heart every time we prioritize our own ego over the well-being of others. God is like the sun, always shining. Evil is just us closing the shutters and complaining that it's dark.
And that brings us to the end of a truly thought-provoking conversation. What I'm taking away today is this: evil isn't something created by God, it's something that emerges when we turn away from the proper order of love. When love of self and the world rise above love for others and for God, everything becomes inverted. Our rationality, which should guide us toward truth, can instead become a tool for justification. Our freedom, which is meant for good, can be used to harm. And yet this is the hopeful part: we're never alone in that struggle. As Swedenborg has explained, life is a constant spiritual tension, a kind of inner battleground. But it's also a place of choice. At every moment we're being gently led toward what is good, toward what is true, toward a life that aligns with heaven rather than hell. So the origin of evil isn't some distant mystery, it's something close, something personal, something we all wrestle with. And maybe that's exactly where the real work begins. A big thank you to Emanuel Swedenborg for joining us, and to you for listening and engaging with these ideas. If this episode got you thinking, you can explore more at swedenborg.netlify.app, where there's a free copy of Heaven and Hell waiting for you. Get in touch. Email eswedenborg888@gmail.com. Whether it's a thought about the origin of evil, a personal reflection, a question about Swedenborg's teachings, or even a topic you'd like covered in a future episode, don't hesitate to reach out. Your insights help shape the direction of these conversations. Until next time, take care and pay attention to what you love, because, as we've heard today, that just might shape your eternity. Thanks again for listening. This episode was written and produced by Paul Manning in Brisbane, Australia, April 2026, bringing Swedenborg's ideas into the 21st century using modern technology, human and AI creative cooperation, and just enough imagination to make an 18th century mystic feel right at home.